Welcome back to Royals Weekly. I am your host, Marcus Mead, and joining me as always, the proud owner of 17 different pairs of Crocs, my brother Mike. So many different colors.
Oh, I'm an aficionado. You have to have so many to be able to participate in the fan club and the organizations, the conventions. I can't walk in on wearing the same pair 2 days to the convention. So you
Right.
gotta,
Yeah. That
gotta
makes sense.
vary it up.
Do you want to hear a funny story about Crocs?
Sure.
So when, what's his name? Oh, I forget his name. The guy who made Idiocracy. When he decided
Mike Judge?
when they were making Idiocracy, they were doing like wardrobe for it, and they wanted to find what they considered to be like the dumbest, stupidest pair of shoes anybody could wear in the future. And Crocs had just been invented, but they weren't like popular at the time. And so they found the little company that made Crocs, and they were like, "This is like the dumbest thing ever. This will never catch on. This is like, but this is what they'll be doing in a future full of stupid people." And so they had everybody in Idiocracy in the future wears Crocs, right? So pay attention to that movie. They're all wearing Crocs. And that was their idea of being like, this is the stupidest thing ever. And then, of course, Crocs exploded, and now they're worn all the time by children mostly, I think. But Mike, I assume a bunch of kids wear them to your school. I see them.
Tons of them. And they got like little things you can put on them. Like it's part, gotta set yourself apart, my individuality kind of stuff.
Right, by wearing Crocs. And then
We all wear Crocs. We put different tokens on them.
Yes.
And then they'll swap them and stuff during the day.
Different tokens of the gross. Anyway, on this week's episode, because there's nothing to talk about Royals related, we might just keep the Crocs conversation going. But we'll try and dig into some Royals stuff. We'll discuss a little bit about what we're looking out for in spring training because their Royals haven't done anything. We might have some interesting spring training stuff to talk about, and then we're going to really excited to show you what we finally got Noah Cameron to sit down and talk with us. And so we're going to provide you parts of our Noah Cameron interview. If you'd like to hear the whole interview, we have that exclusively available for people who are paid Substack subscribers. You can go hear the whole interview on there if you become a paid Substack subscriber. For $5, you get an extra episode every week. You get articles. You get at least one weekly article, and then hopefully a few more articles here and there. Well worth the $5, I feel like. $5, basically nothing. You can get nothing for $5 anymore. And so
we used to say that's a cup of coffee. It's not even a cup of coffee.
Not even a cup of coffee. I paid $7.50 for a cup of coffee the other day. And so I think it's worth it. I think there's a lot of great value there, but this Noah Cameron interview is excellent. So thank you to him for taking the time to sit down with us. We really appreciate that. And then of course, we'll talk a little about something that has nothing to do with baseball during our last segment of the episode. We do need to remind you, of course, that, Bet Online continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, Bet Online provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, and college basketball, NHL, to UFC, head to Bet Online today and don't forget to use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. It's a little early to dig into spring training, I'll admit that. The Royals won't see the dirt of Surprise Arizona for another month and a half. But frankly, there's nothing else to talk about right now. The Royals aren't doing anything. They're chilling. And so we'll talk a little bit about spring training now. And if the Royals decide to do something, we'll cover that later, maybe in lieu of our spring training discussion. Despite the fact that the Royals aren't doing much, there will be plenty to focus on during spring training. Actually, I was thinking about this earlier while I was writing our weekly wrap-up. And I had a few things to focus on in spring training and for the wrap-up, but then I just had more and more come into my mind. And so I wanted to talk about it with you, Mike. We're going to give two things that each of us will be looking for at spring training and paying particular attention to from the major league guys. Obviously, minor leagues will be doing their own thing during spring training. But, Mike, what is your top thing that you're looking for at spring training this year?
Well, I took more of a 30,000-foot view of the team. I didn't focus on any one player or any one position or anything like that. But my biggest thing I'm curious about, the thing that led them all the way to the playoffs last year, was the starting rotation. So my biggest thing is who gets the 4 and 5 spot in the starting rotation? Are they going to go out and get somebody, a veteran, to fill one of those spots? Or are they truly going to say, here's a competition. We have Bubic. We have Noah Cameron. He'll talk a little bit in the interview about, his aspirations for this coming up season. They've got, Daniel Lynch, who showed some promise in the bullpen last year. They got Alec Marsh, who they used in that role last year in the first half to very success to a a pretty good amount of success. So really, you've got 5 guys. That's if they don't bring anybody in to fill those 2 spots, probably. And so it'll be very interesting to see where they go with that. And as we always say, you need 6, 7, 8 guys for a starting rotation in a year. And so even the guys that don't make it, I'll be curious to see how they pitch in spring training to see if they're ready to step up for that fill in spot that you have to have in Major League Baseball.
Yes, and the innings accumulation gets interesting with guys like Bubic and Kyle Wright in that mix. Even Noah Cameron, who hasn't thrown over 150 innings in a season, any professional season up to this point. You have to wonder about innings limits and things like that. Daniel Lynch also. I think Daniel Lynch, of those 5 starters that you mentioned, I think and Marsh might have the most innings actually last year, but after him comes Daniel Lynch, and then after him it takes a pretty big drop off. And so it's one of those things where they'll have to figure out a solution to the fact that Chris Bubic, if he makes the 4 or 5 spot, probably isn't going to throw 180 innings next year because he only threw like 32 last year. And so there might be some mixing and matching. There might be some, Chris Bubic is going to start the year in our rotation, and then we're going to see what happens from there, kind of thing. I don't know exactly how it'll work, but what we need to pay attention to is one, innings accumulation and how that's going to work, but also the Royals are very unlikely to stay as healthy as they were in the rotation last year. You're right, Mike. That 6th, 7th, and 8th starter, they're going to get innings this year. They're going to make starts for the Royals because the odds of the top 5 guys staying as healthy as they did last year are very long. And so whether or not it's Bubic or Marsh or Marsh and Cameron or Cameron and Wright or whatever the combination is that wraps out that top 5, ultimately, we need to be thinking about this rotation as Ragans, Lugo, Waka, Bubic, Marsh, Lynch, Cameron, Wright. All of those guys are the starting rotation. They may just spend their time in Omaha a little bit or moving back and forth between Omaha and Kansas City. My first thing, and if you haven't seen the whole list of things I came up with, you can go read the Substack, but I came up with a couple extra to have as part of this conversation. My first thing, and a thing that greatly interests me because I think it's a really important season for him, is what sort of changes has Maikel Garcia made in the offseason? One of the things that I think was most disappointing in 2024 was the fact that he essentially made no changes in between 2023 and 2024. He had a chance to sort of build on his offensive performance, to make something more out of it, to progress, and it just didn't happen. I think he might have tried to. I think he might have been trying some different things, but they clearly didn't work and actually sent him in the wrong direction offensively. He has got to stop hitting the ball on the ground so much. That kills him. And if he can do that, if he can learn to elevate the ball a little bit more, he has a better chance. I know a lot of people are like, no, he needs to just play his game and stay up the middle of the field. And no, he needs to pull the ball and he needs to hit it in the air, right? Like it's fine if he wants to be an all field hitter. He absolutely can be. Line drives away, line drives and fly balls to the pull side. Okay. Because the 48% ground ball rate or something that he has right now, not going to work for his offensive profile because he just doesn't hit the ball that hard. So his ground balls aren't like rockets going through the infield. They're like fairly weak, fairly easy to manage. And so I want to see Garcia have some significant changes made in this offseason.
I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the walk rates that he had in minor league baseball. This is over 2 different spots in 2021, 16% and 9.9% over the entire 2021 season. You're looking at 9, 8, 17. That's over the 2018 season, over a couple different levels. Major League Baseball, he has never had over 7%. Okay. And that's my thing. And that's kind of what frustrates me with Maikel Garcia. And we used to see this kind of all the time with Royals hitters as they develop. What is your identity as a hitter? What role does this team need you to fill? Okay. And all development should be working towards that. Right. And it doesn't really feel that way with him.
And it really shouldn't be what role does this team need you to fill. It should be like what profile do you have, best. Period. Yeah. What will you fulfill the best? For him, if it's going to be like, I can't produce big time exit velocities, I'm not going to have even average power, then it needs to be an on-base slasher type player. But you can't be that if you're walking at less than 7%. That's not a thing. Like, we just saw the passing of Ricky Henderson, one of the great players in the history of the game. And what was interesting about him is he knew that, yeah, he had a little bit more power than your traditional leadoff hitter, but he knew that his job was to get on base and steal bases. And that's what he did, right? Like, Maikel Garcia, if you're going to be a slasher, then you have to walk way more than you currently do.
Yeah, and that's the thing I think people kind of misunderstand about Ricky Henderson because of the high, the records for stolen bases and stuff like that. If you take away every stolen base Ricky Henderson had, he's still a Hall of Famer.
Yeah,
because his OBP is over 400 or something. Like he was an unbelievable leadoff hitter because he got on base, not just because he stole bases. And that's what I always thought was kind of missing from Maikel Garcia. And the promise of Maikel Garcia in the minor leagues was that he did have a walk rate that was respectable. And you never really felt like he was going to hit for power back then because he's always had that extremely skinny frame and never hit for big time home run numbers or anything like that. So I think he has to figure out, hey, I make my money getting on base. And until he can really fix that approach to do that, I don't know that he's going to reach his potential as a hitter.
Yeah, so I'll be paying a close attention to see what he's up to in spring training, to see if that approach looks different, to see if he can find a way to get on base more or unlock some more power or something. Stop hitting the ball on the ground is like a good first start, I think. Mike, what is the second thing that you're going to be paying really close attention to in spring training?
I'm really looking at kind of the usage and how they fit in the Jonathan India, Michael Massey, Maikel Garcia trio with the second base, third base stuff. Now, I don't expect India
throw left field in there.
I'll throw left field for sure, because I don't think India or Massey play third base. I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think so either.
My thought is at some point they may go get a third baseman. Then what you're really talking about is the India, Massey, Garcia turn at second base or left field. And so if you want to get all three guys or two of the three on the field, you may have to open up that left field spot as well. So, but how is that used? How does how does Jonathan India change what this team is doing defensively and in the lineup? He's going to slot in as your leadoff hitter most of the time when he's in there. What does that mean? Well, then where are you putting him in the field? What does that mean for those other guys?
Well, he's the interesting one because of those three, he's the one you could say, like, he's pretty much going to play every day because of his on-base ability, because of his ability to be a leadoff hitter in front of Bobby Witt Jr. He's probably going to play pretty much every day. And so some days I think it will be at second, and some days it'll be somewhere else. I think left field is going to be a real possibility for India. I don't think they want Massey in left field. I don't think they want Garcia in left field. That would be crazy.
I don't want Massey in left field because of the back thing. If you're running around, you're diving for balls.
Right. The back thing, but also his arm is super weak, even weaker than India's, and he is not nearly as fast as India. And so all the sort of indicators point to the notion that India would probably be a better left fielder than Michael Massey will be. Now we'll see. There is, some guys have a more natural instinct for tracking fly balls in the outfield than other guys do, but we'll see what they both look like. I think we're going to see both of them in left field at times in spring training so they can see what those two look like out there, because they have to solve a problem here, which is that they have two second base only second basemen. And right now that ain't going to fly because they can't both play there. And so I don't know what the Garcia thing. I mean, right now Garcia is their only third baseman. And so it'll only be a thing for him is if they bring somebody else in which case it might be a rotation. It might be the name that interests me that's still out there is Yoan Moncada. Mike, I know you're a big fan of his. Mm-hmm. We've talked about him in the past. Guy who gets injured way too often, but because of that will be pretty cheap, I think. And so we'll see how that ends up playing out. But it will be interesting to focus on or to get a look at what sort of combinations. And we know it's not a straight, like Massey's going to play at second, India will play at left. Matt Quatraro is going to use rotation and play matchups and move guys around and mix it all together. He's much more interested in that than like Massey, you're at second every day, India, you're in left every day. It won't look like that from Matt Quatraro, I don't think. The second thing I'll be paying really close attention to is what do they do with the corner outfield? The corner outfield is the bane of this team's existence right now because they can't find any corner outfielders who can produce offensively for them up to this point. Obviously, MJ Melendez and Hunter Renfroe have been a disappointment. We've talked about that quite a bit, but Drew Waters hasn't produced out there. Nelson Velasquez stopped producing out there after his brief stint of excellence in 2023. Tyler Gentry hasn't showed that he's ready to produce at the major league level. There are a lot of guys who haven't really come through for them in the corner outfield, and they haven't done anything to really address that fact. They haven't, unless their thinking is India is going to play left field. It's still not what you really want in a corner outfield duo. Would be like Jonathan India and MJ Melendez, or Jonathan India and Hunter Renfroe. That's not like that's off. Those are offensive positions. You're probably not going to get much offensively out of those two. And so, Mike, what are your thoughts on what they might try with that corner outfield?
I still think there's trade. Trade is probably the most likely outcome for, well, maybe not likely, but statistically. But I think that you end up targeting someone in a trade and they end up getting somebody to fill one of those corner outfield spots. I think the other one, you're going to end up with a big time rotation. The hard part here is Hunter Renfroe is going to be on the team. He's going to be taking up a spot.
That's
either
what I'm
way.
wondering. Like, will he? Like, if they bring somebody in to play the corner outfield, let's say they sign an Anthony Santander, right? Which they won't. But let's say they sign somebody and that person's a corner outfielder. That means they have MJ Melendez, Hunter Renfroe, this new guy, and
probably have to play one of the people we're just talking about at
Jonathan
some point.
India. Let's call Jonathan India a corner outfielder at this point. That means you have 4 corner outfielders. That's too many. You can't, like, the numbers don't work out because Hunter Renfroe or MJ Melendez, they're not utility players. They can't go into the infield and play for you or play center field. And so
that's the thing. You have 4 corner outfielders, none of whom can play center at all.
Right. Can play center or an infield position. I mean, I guess technically MJ Melendez could catch, but you don't want that to happen. And so they're running out of roster spots at that point. If they bring anybody in to play the corner outfield, they're going to have to think about moving either MJ Melendez or Hunter Renfroe. In my mind, it makes no sense to move MJ Melendez at this point, unless your return is what you're getting in that trade. You know what I'm saying? Like if they could trade MJ Melendez as part of a package for JJ Bleday or something like that, that would be one thing. But the notion of like getting rid of Melendez over Renfroe makes no sense to me because Renfroe is just cooked. There's no coming back from what Renfroe is. And so we'll see on that front. I think the corner outfield is going to be one of those places where they're going to be a little bit concerned going into spring training again, I think. Royals Weekly is brought to you by All In Physical Therapy. You already know that All In Physical Therapy can turn ordinary people into Captain America. But what you don't know is that our mother loved her experience there because of the personal attention she got from Tommy and the staff at All In. They guarantee a personalized one-on-one experience to suit the needs of patients recovering from total joint surgeries, sports injuries, or any kind of injury or pain.
What about the pain of realizing you'll never reach your dreams, huh?
That's the pain Mike knows deep in his soul. All In Physical Therapy is owned and operated by Tommy Freevert with locations in Blue Springs, Lee Summit, and Belton. But most importantly, they're in network for nearly all insurance providers.
Good. Because I got a lot of work to do to achieve the mobility of most 60-year-olds.
Yes, that is the case. I've seen you move. If you're a high school athlete recovering from injury or someone bouncing back with a brand new hip or knee, check out the best physical therapy in the KC Metro at allin-pt.com. That's ALLIN-pt.com. Or give them a call at 816-427-5300. That's 816-427-5300. We are very lucky to be joined by Royals pitching prospect and newest addition to the Royals 40-man roster, Noah Cameron. Thank you so much for joining us, Noah. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
For those of you who don't know, Noah's been in the Royals organization since 2021 and put together a fantastic season last year across AA Northwest Arkansas and AAA Omaha. A stellar 2024 earned him a spot on the 40-man roster, and he now stands on the precipice of a major league debut. That must be great news for you, Noah. You must be feeling pretty good this offseason, I got to imagine.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I imagine. For our listeners, though, who don't get a chance to see you pitch as often, how would you describe yourself as a pitcher?
Good question. I have always been a control pitcher. I've never, when I was a little kid, I was always throwing really hard, and kind of used that, I guess, to pitch. But really, ever since even high school, senior year, I was topping out at 88 maybe. And then into college, kind of have built, 1 to 2 mile an hour every year. But just always a command pitcher, being able to use multiple pitches and any count has definitely been my strength. And just being able to pitch backwards to people and keep hitters off their on their toes, I guess.
Well, yeah, and that's I've always seen it as like a little maybe now in modern baseball a little easier to gain the velocity.
Mhm.
And if you already have the pitching acumen and the control stuff,
Yeah.
now that we know kind of how to gain velocity and how to improve stuff a little bit, I feel like that's a
Yeah.
good path for a lot of guys, really.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. I think that's been easier, or I guess easier for me to be on that side. Because usually, there's two groups of pitchers. It's the groups that the guys throw really hard, and it's like, okay, you're in kind of control camp or command camp, and pitch design and kind of figuring out how to do that. And it's like, okay, Noah, like I've been in velo camp a couple times in the last few years and stuff, and trying to get that uptick to kind of be a mid 90s guy and just kind of stay there. But thankfully, I've always had the command and the pitches to kind of, yeah, do that, I guess.
Yeah.
quick question for you there on that as we kind of go through what you've done in the Royals minor league system here. When you made that jump to Double A from Quad Cities, you had a lot of success in Quad Cities. You made that jump halfway through the season to Double A and struggled just a little bit. What was it about that Double A environment that made it so hard, make for a lot of guys when they transitioned there?
Yeah, that was definitely for sure. I mean, obviously, so far, my biggest jump and definitely the toughest, and faced a lot of adversity. And even just a confidence dip, and kind of started getting hit hard there for a little bit. For me, I always think that it was the hitter's approach towards me. That was kind of I don't know if that was just kind of what I was telling myself. I think velo is down a little bit, which obviously kind of has a factor in it. But because my debut of Double A that year was 7 inning shutout against the Dodgers, the Tulsa Drillers, and so it was like kind of like like this is like the same, this is easy, like I can kind of do this. And I think I had another good outing, and then like I think it was my third outing was like got hit around the yard. And it was just different because I was throwing my changeup, which I always have, and just relying on it a lot in that game. And kind of from there on out, like my changeup was just getting hammered. I was thrown at the same spot, the same locate, like same velo. I was still trying to mix it up a little bit, and I was just kind of getting hit. But I think it was their approach of I was struggling a lot with throwing curveballs in the strike zone. So I had noticed from teams that anytime I would throw it, no matter where it was just an auto take. They weren't even looking at it, like they weren't biting at it. So it was like, hey, if you throw it in the strike zone, and we'll kind of change our approach. And that just didn't happen that year in Double A. I just kind of continued to struggle with that. And so all they did was, hey, we're going to sit on your changeup. If you want to beat us with fastballs throwing 90, 92, go ahead. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to kind of keep throwing changeups and trying to beat them with that. And it just was not working. So I think it was their approach. That's what I've always told myself. So.
Yeah, and actually that kind of encourages me a little bit
Mhm.
because I think if guys cruise through, they
Mhm.
don't they don't develop that tenacity or that adaptability to
Yeah.
handle situations like that, which are obviously going to come up in Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
Like there's going to
100%.
be stretches where you can't locate your curveball for a strike, or maybe your velocity is down a little bit, and guys are able to wait for a fastball. So that actually encourages me when I hear stuff like that happening
Yeah.
at Double A. Because then it's like, oh wait, this person isn't going to get to Major League Baseball and fall apart the first time it gets hard.
Right. Yeah.
I think that anecdote though jives really well with the experience of a lot of minor leaguers going from high A to Double A, which is that the approach of Double A hitters tends to be a little bit further ahead than the approach of the lower level guys, who they can't lay off that curveball that looks enticing in the middle of the zone. They can't diagnose that pitch with the same speed as the others.
Right. Yeah. 100%. I think I actually was asked this question just in a conversation the other day of kind of like what's the difference between lower levels and those Double A, Triple A levels. And yeah, I mean, obviously it's usually older people, just older, college guys or just guys that have been in minor league baseball for 5 years now. And obviously, like I look back at my first year in low A and high A, and I look at that guy that was throwing compared to what I'm doing now, and I'm like, wow, I don't like how I looked, and I don't like how the ball was coming in, and mechanically, I was like, wow, I was doing a lot of things wrong. And I think that's just everybody, obviously like everybody develops, like not just myself, but everybody develops kind of throughout the minor leagues. So. definitely in those lower levels, like I remember guys, I mean, swinging at stuff that I'm like, wow, like that was not a good pitch, you know. But I was also probably throwing it down the middle more often, and I was probably making bad decisions like pitch calling and stuff like that more often as well. So I think it, goes hand in hand. I'm facing older guys hitting and double A, triple A, but they're also facing older guys pitching and us trying to do our job as well. So
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, very indicative of your strikeout numbers in low A and high A were just in video game numbers. I mean, they were
yeah,
insane,
it's
and
fun.
that you have to attribute some of that at least to the fact that you have a lot of 18, 19, 20-year-olds out there just kind of whatever
Yeah.
gets thrown out of a hand, I'm swinging at.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I wanted to ask a little bit about that difficult stretch in Double A, just so our audience can kind of understand what the process is like for a pitcher and the pitching coaches he's working with when things are difficult for a stretch like that. What's the conversation like about what changes need to be made? Who's involved in that conversation? How do you go about figuring out what's not working and what you need to change?
Yeah, it's a little bit more involved, I guess. Like, when you're cruising and you're stacking up all these good starts in a row, it's like nobody's really talking to you because what do you have to talk about? It's like, hey, continue what you're doing. You're obviously doing something right. Like obviously we're still watching video and but it's a lot more compliments and you're doing a great job type stuff. So I think that was more like, okay, let's get some more hands-on work, because really before that, like I wasn't having much failure, so I wasn't really in contact with our director and a lot of these pitching coaches guys and all that stuff. So I think it was definitely more hands-on, more like, hey, what are we doing wrong? Like, is it a mechanical thing, is it a confidence thing? Like, okay, like it's all of it, let's kind of work together, figure that out. It was more watching video, more putting that video into action, and catch play and bullpens, a little bit more focused bullpens of like, okay, let's go a little bit more game speed, to try and figure something out, figure out a something to click, I guess, to then take that into the game. But yeah, but when you're having success, it's more just like get your work in, feel it good, feel all your pitches and locate and kind of just continue, every day. So it's a little bit more, yeah, a little bit more kind of a step back, in a sense of just like, okay, like, something obviously needs to change, um, rather than, you just kind of going through every day and stuff like that. So.
So is that something that they would come to you like during the season and say, here, these are the changes we want to make? Or they're going to wait till the off season to give you a plan to change some of that stuff?
Yeah, no, it was pretty. Obviously, I kind of had like a few weeks of it, so it wasn't like an immediate. Oh my gosh, you had one bad game, because
Hmm.
obviously everybody
Right.
had bad games. But it was kind of after like that third, fourth, fifth one in a row, and it's like, okay, like something isn't right. You don't look like how you looked in the lower levels type thing. So it was a pretty, a few weeks in, like, okay, like let's sit down, kind of, we all had a meeting and just talked with the director and our pitching coaches there, and kind of figured out a plan of like, okay, we're gonna try and throw more fastballs inside to get hitters off. We're gonna just try and mix some things up to try and get people off of the changeup, and didn't really work at that point, but then it obviously transitioned into the off season and getting better and coming back in this last year. So.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I was going to ask you about going into this 2024 season, where you had just a phenomenal season, and there were a lot of changes in between the two.
Mhm.
What were those changes that you were hoping to make at the end of that 2023 season? Did you get all of those accomplished? Because we saw a lot of them.
Mhm.
And how do you feel like that has added value to you as a pitcher?
Yeah, I definitely think obviously we had a really successful year, overall, and obviously there was a few bad games in there, sprinkled in, but obviously the final result, was obviously where we wanted to be at, for sure. So I think a big thing was obviously adding the cutter, that everybody kind of knows now, just to throw something else. And I actually had, even though it was really new, I had a lot of confidence in it. Super early on, actually, like it was almost coming out better than my fastball. Like I was like, man, like I really liked the feeling of it. I threw it inside to right-handed hitters. I didn't really throw it to lefties at all until the very end in AAA. but it was like we're gonna, because that was kind of what I was struggling with, was against right-handed hitters. So we used that to throw inside a lot, and that was awesome. Now we're gonna kind of like start developing it more, throwing it back door to righties, kind of maybe throwing something to lefties, um, just as more weapons for sure. Definitely fastball usage. We tried to climb up a little bit. Sometimes because I tend to go to my changeup, and the curveball got a lot better, and the cutter. Now my fastball usage was dropping quite a bit, so we tried to get that back up, just to attack with your fastball, and when my fastball is really good, that's when everything else kind of plays a little bit better. So that was a big focus. A big focus was throwing a lot of curveballs, throwing them to righties, lefties, making it harder and a little bit smaller, which we did, which we accomplished. I like average fat or average curveball velo a couple years ago is maybe 77, 78, and this last year it was like 82. So it was definitely just a little bit harder, not as big and loopy. But that was a big focus, and we accomplished that. So definitely a lot to be proud of,
Yeah.
thankfully. So
Well, I got to talk a little bit about it in detail because that's where my passion lies. Is like the nitty gritty of it. I've watched nearly all of your starts from 2024, and
Mhm.
one of the early things I started to notice was that cutter was being used a lot early in counts against righties,
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
there were times when you would use the four seam late in counts elevated, and it
Yeah.
seemed like the cutter was making that four seam more effective. Is
Yeah.
that something you all planned for to happen, and
Mhm.
or how do you see that those two pitches playing together?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely something that we planned and we tried to kind of put in play. Because early in counts, I was getting hurt with fastballs early in counts. Just because it's, I don't want to say relatively straight, but it's more of a straight fastball, not a big sinker, nothing like that. And when I was having trouble locating it inside, because really our where it plays best is kind of that up and in, to right-handed hitters, just to not let them get extended on it. And so we liked going cutter, because then that's what they see something that's super gets in on their hands, and then the four seam with a little bit of arm side run, that it just kind of was able to play up above the zone, and late inside for sure. So
Yeah, that was kind of the thing that I noticed when coming out was how much better your four seam fastball was as a result of
Mhm.
that. Yeah, that's fantastic. In the second half, there you mentioned how good that was, and a little bit of time there in AAA this past year. You had immediate success in 9 starts there in
Mhm.
AAA. It was great to see. Did you notice a difference? We talked about the jump between high A and double A. Did you notice there a difference when facing those AAA hitters? And then, if you were, how were you able to continue to have that success? Uh, because when you think of AAA hitters, we think of guys who a lot of them have major league experience or they have a lot of minor league experience and are really solid in their
Mhm.
approach. And so, what allowed you to have that success then moving into AAA without that sort of drop down that a lot of people have when they get there?
Yeah. I think, like I've talked about, the double A drop down, I think was a lot of confidence based. It was kind of a shock of like, oh, they're hitting that. Why are they hitting that? Because I had never, that pitch that I threw right there, like, had never been hit, and now it is. And I think when I got to AAA this year, I think we had already been there. You guys had already said, like, you had that adversity moment in double A. And so I was like, even if that would have happened, I think I would have been able to respond, in a lot better and a lot quicker way, to be like, okay, like, they hit it, like, that's fine. I'm gonna, attack them with something else. And I think we just had that confidence in all of my weapons, is like, I'm going to get these guys out in 10 different ways. Like, it's no longer like, oh, I have to throw a change up here to strike him out. It's like, no, let's throw a curveball, strike him out. Let's throw a cutter to jam him and roll over double play. Let's throw a fastball elevated and strike him out, stuff like that. So I think it was more of just, I was more confident in myself, to get him out in any way. Obviously, I think also just the elevated, I don't want to say pressure, but the elevated, like, okay, I'm on a bigger scale. I'm one step away from the major leagues. Like, there's a little bit more writing on it now than being just a young prospect, just got to double A. Like, like, if I don't have as much success. It's not like I'm going to go to the major leagues this year anyway. And that was my goal last year. I was trying to continue climbing, and get to the major leagues, and it almost happened last year. And that's okay that it didn't, because we're looking forward to this year. But yeah, I think I was just more confident and more ready, more prepared, for sure. So.
I feel like Omaha sets up well for that too. If you go to a Storm Chasers game, like people go to those games a lot, and
Yeah.
it's an environment that feels like a step up. I think, because I've been to both
Yeah.
Northwest Arkansas and Omaha, it
Yeah,
really
I
can
agree.
feel like that.
I agree. Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Mhm.
Last of our, let's quote unquote serious questions here.
Last of the serious ones. We're real serious, guys.
Yeah. Mike is not drinking during this interview.
Dude.
What personal goals do you have going into the 2025 season? So it's a little bit different for you. You have you're not really looking back at a 2024 and saying I need to change such. You're probably saying I need to keep the success going. What are your
Yeah.
personal goals for 2025 then?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, first and foremost, I obviously want to break camp with the team. I think there's this spring training, comes a lot of, um, I guess, a lot riding on it. If I don't perform, it's not the end of the world. I most likely, or I guess possibly, will go back to AAA, and that's okay. And I'll earn my spot, from AAA. But obviously, I want to go in fighting, and obviously, with the Singer trade, with there's two spots really, up for grabs. There's been talk about Bubic, sliding in one of those roles, but my goal is to beat Bubic out. It's to beat those guys out, and obviously in a teammate manner. Not trying to be douchey.
But that's
or
what you
whatever,
want in a
but-
starting rotation. Competition.
Right,
It makes
right.
you all
So
better.
healthy
and I love
competition,
it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's obviously the biggest goal, is to break camp right away, because that's attainable, and they've communicated with me come in fighting for a spot, because it's not like you're just our seventh guy and you're going back to AAA. It's especially being on the major league roster now. It's obviously a lot easier, for that to happen. So that's my number one goal. If that doesn't happen, obviously, going back to AAA, it's not the worst thing. Going back there and continuing what I was doing last year, and just have them just build even more confidence, in me, and just build that relationship, with the major league, staff, and with the team, and being a key piece, to hopefully going on a championship run next year. So.
Yeah, that's so interesting because when the Singer trade happens, I think everybody who sort of follows the team closely says, well, this looks like a vote of confidence in their starting pitching depth. And so you are, of course, a very key part of that starting pitching depth, along with a couple others. They also say, what happens if Bubic and Cameron end up in the rotation? Both of them, they have three lefties in a starting rotation. That's an interesting mix right there. And so you might get some left-handed compatriots with you.
Yeah.
Lefties aren't going to have much to do against the Royals rotation if that's the thing.
Yeah, for sure.
That is all the questions that we have for you today, Noah. We'll let you get back to a life of something more compelling.
No, that was
we
great.
really appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
We love your
Absolutely.
insight. Our listeners love the insight from players. So thank you so much for that.
That's awesome. Absolutely.
We'll be keeping our eyes open because we're pretty sure you're making it to Major League Baseball at some point in 2025. So we're going to be crossing our fingers for you. All right.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Royals Weekly is brought to you by Eric Oxer of West USA Realty. Phoenix has all of our favorite things: year-round golf, year-round baseball, and Eric Oxer of West USA Realty. Whether you want to buy your dream retirement home or just stay a while and catch spring training, Eric can help you find the perfect house. We've known him for 30 years and trust him far more than we even trust each other.
Trust is earned, Mark, and not by your brother forgetting to catch you during a trust fall.
Forgetting. Eric does
heavy.
Yes, I was saving myself there. Eric does long-term rentals for the Snowbird crowd and home sales and purchases for those who want to stay a while longer. Are you a baseball player or parent who needs a place in the Phoenix area? Eric will help you find the perfect spot fast. You want to spend your days shanking golf balls into the great beyond? Eric knows the golf scene like Mike knows how to consume a grilled cheese that's been pretty mangled. I watched it the other night. Find Eric online at ericoxer.com if you can figure out how to spell his name. It's ERICKAUXIER.com. Or just shoot him a text at 480-383-9745. That's 480-383-9745. Even if you're just curious about what he can do for you, he's 100% no pressure, one of the best people we know.
And he can river dance like a young Michael Flatley.
Gorgeous. we'll end this week's episode like we end every episode with our Just About Outside segment, where we talk about something that's interesting to us outside the world of baseball. Mike, it's been like a month since we've done this. I know you've had a ton going on in that time. Tell me what's been on your mind lately.
Well, I have had a ton going on in my life in that time, with the holidays and things like that. But probably the biggest thing going on in my life in the last month is that my wife sought out and attained a new job. Okay. And it got me thinking, and it's kind of always been a philosophy of mine, but one that you and I talk about sometimes. And it's the idea that I don't feel anyway, that any person, any employee should be loyal to their job. Okay. And I think our generations of ours, I think our generation's kind of the cutoff point. A lot of people older than us will be loyal to a company for 30 years plus. People in our generation and younger, a lot of times I think feel like they have to move a lot of times to get the things that they want out of a job, which is increases in pay and better benefits and things like that. I have only ever experienced that. Here's the thing. I have never seen a company return the loyalty to a person that they give to that company. And so that's why I've always kind of said, don't be loyal to a company, because you won't ever get that in return. When it comes down to it and it's time for them to be loyal, they will never show that back to you. And a kind of a grave or an example of that, I guess you would say, is as my wife is leaving, my wife is kind of a manager of a very small eye doctor's office. And she watched as two people who worked for her, and this was not of her doing, were kind of let go after giving 2 weeks notice, prior to that 2 weeks notice ending. Right. And so these people basically had to go without a week's pay because they did the right thing and told their employer that they were leaving in 2 weeks. Right. And the employer just said, no, we're not going to pay you for that second week. So your last day is going to be this. And of course you don't plan for those types of things. And if you're a person who relies on consistent source of income, that can be a big, big thing for you. And so that's just one example, but I've never really seen companies do right by an employee if they weren't legally forced to. So I've always, if I have a bit of advice to give, and even for me, and I'm a public educator, so the loyalty that I get from a public school district is a lot more than what I get, what a corporate, company might give to one of their employees, but they're still not going to be loyal to me if it comes down to it. If it comes down to protecting themselves or protecting me, they're going to throw me right into the wolves. Okay. And that's why I always say, you cannot be loyal to a position. It is just a job. Okay. As soon as you start thinking of it as your passion or your life
identity,
or whatever, your identity, they're going to exploit that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they do it to teachers all the time. And so, it's not your passion. It's not your life. It's not your identity. It's what you do for money. If you start thinking of it that way and treat it as such, you can then improve things. So my wife was able to move to a new position, and yes, it was hard for her to get this job, and it was multiple interviews, and those aren't fun, and everybody knows that, but she's in a much better place now because of that initiative, because she didn't say, okay, I'm going to stay loyal to you forever in the promises that you give me, because they gave plenty of promises. I'm going to go to a place where I could, moving benefits me. I'm going to move. And so,
but also this new place, not going to be loyal to them either.
Also,
guess what?
Exactly.
They will not show it to her.
Exactly.
This is one of my big things whenever I talk to young people is if they ask me about jobs, especially in academia, higher education, where I work, my big thing is you must look out for you. I have graduate assistants who work underneath me, and sometimes they'll be looking for jobs outside of that. And I'm like, yeah, it's better for me if you stay on here, but don't do it. Go get another job. Go find something better. You should be, because this place will not look out for you because it is not in their best interest to look out for you. Right. Or it probably is for long-term thinking, but the way that they're thinking is you're a commodity. You're an asset. You're not a
human being with kids.
We're not a family. Exactly. We're not.
They'll tell you
you're a family here,
because it works out for them.
Yes, that's all bullshit, right? All you have to do is, and they create weird narratives. I used to hear the narrative that's if you change jobs too frequently, that'll look bad on your resume. It absolutely will not, right? Like they won't care, right? Like if they want you, they'll still take you, even if you've changed jobs every year for the last 5 years. They won't care, right? Like because that's how competition for labor works, right?
And that's what by doing these things, you are telling those companies and those employers exactly what it is. The
Right.
workforce is a marketplace. You have to compete as an employer to get employees. If you're not competing, if you're choosing to use things like, oh, we're a family and we're going to treat each other well and we're going to expect loyalty and we'll be that's not ever going to happen. You're going to continue to lose people. The way you compete is pay, benefits. That's how you compete. So
yeah,
make
and
them
so
compete for you.
make them compete. It sucks because that means you kind of always have to be on the job market, and looking for a job is really tough. But at the end of the day, that's how you maximize your value. I'm talking about something that's that's wildly different, and that is a Christmas. Well, I'm going to call it a Cagemas tradition that my partner and I have come up with for the last 2 years. On Christmas Day, instead of doing anything really Christmas related, we watch Nick Cage movies. It's like a Nick Cage movie marathon day. Some of them are atrocious, as many of Nick Cage movies are, and occasionally you find an okay one. And so it's like a real grab bag of who knows what you're gonna get. And so this year we watched a movie called The Family Man, which is actually like a Christmas movie, and then we watched a movie called Frozen Ground, which was actually pretty good. We got a good Cage one there, and then we watched, of course, Con Air,
which is a classic.
Which is
two classics.
I gotta tell
one
you,
classic, one good one, and one.
I gotta tell you, watching Con Air as an adult,
You love it even more, don't you?
No,
I knew it.
I don't.
I
no.
knew it.
It doesn't hold up, obviously, but also, first off, did you know the guy who directed Con Air? That was the first feature film he'd ever directed. Which, looking at it, it shows, right? It shows, right? And so I just can't even describe to you. There's like 24 points in the movie where I'm just like, how did someone say, "Yep, this is what we're going with"? I just start from pre-production. How did they say, "Yep, we want you in a Southern accent"?
Cage. We think your sweet spot is Southern accent.
Southern
Alabama
accent.
Southern.
Alabama. That's you, buddy. It's just I can't even begin to tell you. But what an interesting thing to watch on develop your own little Christmas traditions here. They don't got to be normal. They can be watching Nick Cage movies, but it's fun for us to sort of do something outside the box there on Christmas. That's what we've been up to lately. That's all we have for you this week. Hopefully you enjoyed the interview with Noah Cameron. Thank you so much to him for sitting down and joining us. Make sure to subscribe to the Royals Weekly Substack, become a paid subscriber, and you get to hear that full Noah Cameron interview and a lot of other bonus content frequently. We're so happy to see you. We'll be back at some point in the next month or so. Thanks for joining us here at Royals Weekly presented by Bet Online. Until then, be good to each other.
And go Royals.